Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants will be in a listen-only mode until the question-and-answer session. When you do have a question, please press star, then 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. With that, it is my pleasure to turn over today's call to Mr. Leland Milstein. You may begin.
Great. Thanks very much. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today at this session of the ACT webcast series. The third webcast series is a monthly webcast held at the lunch hour. The trainings leverage local successes by amplifying to a larger audience two model organizations' methods, materials, and approaches. Sessions are planned to last no more than 1 hour, with two presenters speaking on the same topic from slightly different perspectives. Each for 10 to 15 minutes, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions and answers. This session is approved by the ISA for 1 CEU hour and by SAF for 1 CFE Category 2. If you haven't already given me your certification number, please email me that right after the session so that we can make sure you get your certification. Also, most state landscape architecture boards require only a certificate of completion, which ACT can provide to members after the conference. So if you need that, just shoot me an email after the session. This is a program of the Alliance for Community Trees. If you're not a member, please consider joining us. We are a national network of local and statewide nonprofits and government agencies all working to improve their communities by planting trees. Today's session is Repeat Volunteers, Cultivating Tree Leaders. In promoting the value of urban forests, successfully cultivating repeat volunteers can become your most effective strategy for spreading the word, facilitating projects, building broad support for your mission, and much more. Consistently retaining volunteers requires an investment of time, training, and other resources to sustain the overall quality of your relationship. Retaining volunteers develops a core of supporters who may become your future project leaders, your donors, political advocates, and the best ambassadors for your message. Trees matter. Today we have two Gregs, two experts in the field of volunteer management from the finest tree nonprofits in the country. We'll start off with Greg Tudor, who is the development manager of Friends of Trees in Portland, Oregon. Greg started with Friends of Trees as a volunteer, then managed the volunteer program there for 2 years. Expanding Friends of Trees volunteer base in conjunction with large-scale growth in 2 separate planting programs taught him the value of long-term repeat volunteers. A lifelong tree lover, Greg enjoys hiking and camping with his dogs in his adopted home of the Pacific Northwest. An Oregon State Extension certified organic gardener, Greg is also a board member of the Sauvie Island Center, and we are very lucky to have him here today to talk to us a little bit about retaining volunteers. Thanks so much for being with us, Greg.
Thanks, Leland. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. As Leland mentioned, Friends of Trees is based in Portland, Oregon, and we have a service area in the Portland-Vancouver metropolitan area. We're recently expanding south to the Eugene area. We're merging with the Eugene Tree Foundation, but for now, nearly all of our planting sites are located within 50 miles of Portland. We have 2 programs, the Neighborhood Trees Program and the Green Space Initiative. Neighborhood Trees plantings plant approximately 100 to 250 8 to 12-foot trees. Teams of 5 to 10 volunteers are led by a crew leader and an assistant crew leader during the planting day. Neighborhood coordinators work beforehand to sign up tree purchasers, handle staging site logistics, coordinate food donations, things like that. The success of this program really rests on our ability to recruit, train, and retain high-level repeat volunteers. Our Green Space Initiative also has plantings in the Portland area and the surrounding municipalities. We have volunteer crew leaders in this program as well, but not neighborhood coordinators. To keep things simple, I'm going to speak largely about the Neighborhood Trees program today, but if anyone does have any questions about the Green Space Initiative, I would be happy to answer those. So we are a 21-year-old organization. We recently planted our 400,000th tree in January. We have about between 2,000 and 2,500 volunteers annually, and we typically plant around 20,000 trees and shrubs per season. So building a volunteer growth structure. In an ideal scenario, people volunteer on planting day, have a great time, and they sign up to be a crew leader, attend a training the next fall, and hit the ground running. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's sort of the ideal. When a homeowner purchases a tree with us, we ask that they volunteer in some capacity. The vast majority of them participate on one of the planting crews. Like I said, in the best case scenario, this one-time volunteer really enjoys the experience, maybe returns for another planting, then decides to attend our one-day crew leader training, and then becomes a crew leader with Friends of Trees. In a large number of cases, the people who actually do attend our crew leader trainings have never planted with Friends of Trees before, but are looking for an opportunity to get involved at sort of a higher level. We typically see a 15 to 20% dropout rate for our new crew leaders every year, which has been pretty consistent over the past few years despite a large increase in the numbers of crew leaders. Identifying these volunteers can be a little bit tricky. One of the really, really successful methods that we use is it's a little bit of self-selection, but our existing crew leaders are really great about identifying potential crew leaders and introducing them to Friends of Trees staff on planting day for follow-up. We also have some really great relationships with other nonprofits in the area who are willing to post our training schedules in their newsletters. It's really handy for us that we plant in the winter because a lot of other sort of tree-centric nonprofits in our area work more towards the maintenance and fruit tree type stuff. And so they're very active in the spring and summer. And so we have a nice little crossover. As we're starting to ramp down, they're starting to ramp up and vice versa. So the key element to these repeat volunteers is training. It's your foundation. If you have a good foundation, you're going to have a good solid structure. Just like proper planting depth, leadership is a skill to cultivate. It's not necessarily a personality trait. Some people are just vivacious born leaders, but a lot of people need some help. They need to learn techniques. And so it's really important to remember that when you're training volunteers, not just to focus on the arboricultural aspect of it, but also the people skills. Our crew leader program is a one-day-long training, and then the first year is spent as what we call an assistant crew leader. They do 4 to 5 plantings over the course of this first season alongside experienced crew leaders, and then after that first year, they're graduated into as crew leaders. The second year, then, they're the ones that are doing the training with the assistants. Neighborhood coordinators are a bit more sink or swim. They don't have that first year they're not assistant neighborhood coordinators for the first year, unfortunately. So they get 2 days of training and are grouped by planting date. We typically do 4 to 5 neighborhoods per event. So each planting group includes at least one experienced neighborhood coordinator in addition to extensive staff contact. But so that very skilled neighborhood coordinator typically acts in that tutorial role for the newer neighborhood coordinators. So the real secret to repeat volunteers is it's a good staff with good programs. If you make it fun for your volunteers, if you make it a worthwhile experience, they're going to come back. Some of the strategies that we use, we provide breakfast at all of our plantings, so it's just straight-up donut bribery. At our neighborhood trees plantings, we do have potluck lunches. It's another way for the homeowners who are purchasing trees to get involved. If they may not be physically able to plant, they can provide a casserole or a soup or something like that. So the neighborhood trees plantings, as I said previously, are grouped in 4 or 5 neighborhoods per event. We try to maintain these neighborhood groupings from year to year in order to reinforce those connections already made. It makes them feel more like a team, and it allows them to play off each other's strengths and weaknesses. If one person is really good at one portion of it, they know that every year that can be sort of their purview while other people are able to handle other details. Our neighborhood trees manager, Whitney Dorer, actually said it best. She said that we create a space for our volunteers to forge relationships with each other. We try to emphasize the social aspect of what we're doing. We have potluck lunches at the end of every season as a thank you. We do happy hours. We do little meet and greets here and there. We have sort of formal and informal channels. We have the sort of the formal volunteer of the year type structure, and then those informal happy hours and potlucks that are really just a chance for us to sort of check in with people and give them that social outlet that they're looking for and not necessarily get muddy. Pardon me. And then, the easiest way to do it is just show your volunteers how much they mean to you. This is a picture that we turned into a postcard last year as a little thank you at the end of the year. We sent out to all our high-level volunteers. This took us 10 minutes. It was really fun. These brightly colored vests are what the program staff wear on planting day, so everybody knew everybody recognizes that. That's our tree mascot over in the corner there. So it's just a way to reinforce that social connection. I think that's been our really the strongest way for us to retain these volunteers, is to make it something that they enjoy. And so they come back. We don't have to remind them every year that it's time for planting season. We have people calling us to let us know that they're ready to start volunteering again. So I'd be happy to answer any questions now.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Greg. Tricia, can you let folks know how to ask questions?
Certainly. As a reminder, please press star then 1. Please be sure to unmute your phone and clearly record your name when prompted. Again, that's star then 1, and we will allow a few moments for any questions to come in.
I also want to remind folks that you can ask your questions. If you don't want to talk over the phone, you can type your questions into me online using that Q&A tab at the top of your screen. Just type your questions in there, and I will read them out. As people are gathering their questions, I want to ask some questions that are sort of specifically geared towards Friends of Trees, because I know you do some really cool projects and programs there. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you managed to bring in some other volunteer constituencies and then and sort of keep them with you through innovative things you do, like the bicycle tree planting. Do you think that draws in new folks and is a way to keep people engaged by being, sort of unusual and new?
Sure. That's a really good one. It's something that's really important to do. That's listening to your volunteers. I don't know if everybody's familiar with what Leland was talking about, but we do plant by bikes now, where at the planting day we'll have 1 or 2 or sometimes even 3 crews that are planting entirely by bike. And so people have their bike trailers that they load up the trees themselves and the tools, and they do the whole thing sort of carbon negative is what they were calling it. So this is a really great way for us to engage some of our existing volunteers at a higher level, people who were car-free and wanted to extend that ethic to their volunteer service, approached us about doing something like that. And our response was essentially, if you can get the people to do it, you can do it. And so we had a huge turnout the first year, and so we expanded this to a couple more events last year, and then this year we're doing them, it seems like every weekend, but I think it's probably about five events have these bike crews. But the really nice thing is that it's allowed us to tap into Portland's really thriving bike community. We have very good relationships with the environmental community in Portland, sort of the tree huggers, but a lot of the bicyclists it wasn't necessarily their passion for trees that brought them to us. It was their passion for the bicycle lifestyle. And so this really nice crossover brought us a huge amount of attention from the bike community and just attention in general. It's a very innovative approach to it, and it's something that people haven't seen before.
Right. So another question, what criteria do you use to determine who would be awarded a Volunteer of the Year type award?
Sure. The Volunteer of the Year, it's I guess more art than science. It's a conversation among the staff. We look at who's given us the most hours that year, not necessarily the top person, but sort of the top 5 or 10 volunteers. And then it's a conversation among the program staff to talk about who was sort of really there when we needed them, who we could honestly count on. When last year it was very easy. We had a planting that we had to cancel, and so due to bad weather, and so we planted those trees during the next week. And we had the gentleman who ended up being the Volunteer of the Year came out, the Tuesday, the Wednesday, and Thursday and helped us plant all those trees and was just essential that week. This year it's a little bit different. We've got a couple of people in contention, so it was very exciting this year, though, to hear the staff talking about it and who's going to be the Volunteer of the Year. We do a couple other, we call them the Rookie of the Year awards, and they're the new assistant crew leaders who have come to the most plantings, so it's just a strict hours thing. And then we do Crew Leader of the Year for the Neighborhood Trees program and the Green Spaces program, and that's a little bit more driven by the hours. But the Volunteer of the Year is not necessarily the most hours. It's just kind of who's really made an impression that year.
All right. And Tricia, do we have a question over the phone?
I show no questions at this time.
Okay, good, because I've got more. You've got these great photos you talk about creating a social space for your volunteers, and you've got photos of events you've held. Looks like maybe a cookout that you guys had. How do you manage? I guess how do you manage that and the cost of that, and thinking about the cost versus the return in terms of volunteer satisfaction?
Sure. If you look at the current valuation for volunteer time is approximately $20 an hour. And so if you look at the amount of money that volunteers contribute to your organization just in terms of time, it becomes a very easy metric to say, we'll spend $100 on a cookout. We're lucky in that in Portland, if you say potluck, everybody stops what they're doing and brings a casserole. So the end of the year event for the crew leaders and the neighborhood coordinators and the really high-level volunteers is a potluck. We get a keg of beer donated from a local brewery, and everybody brings the food. I think it generally costs us about $60 to $100 for the just stuff here and there, and then the thank you gifts, the T-shirts, and the plaque for the volunteer of the year. So it's a very, very small investment on our part, but it creates that social space that I was talking about before. If they know that nothing's going to be asked of them, they're not planting trees in the rain, it's not muddy, it's just an opportunity for them to enjoy an afternoon with some of their friends, it becomes a very, very good reward, I guess, for lack of a better term, for the volunteers.
Right. And can you give us sort of a sense of scale? How many volunteers do you work with every year, and about how many do you estimate are sort of repeat volunteers or sort of volunteer leaders?
Mm-hmm. So between 2,000 and 2,500 is the number that we use. It's closer to 2,500 now. It was closer to 2,000 about 2 years ago. So 2,500 is a pretty solid number for that. For volunteer leaders, I would feel comfortable saying about 250 to 300. We have a number of active crew leaders in both programs, and then we have neighborhood coordinators in, I think, 90 neighborhoods now. So I would feel comfortable saying about 300 of those are really active repeat volunteers that have been around for more than 3 or 4 years.
Right. And can you tell us a little bit more about the training that you do and how you feel that helps folks stay connected and sort of advance within the organization?
Absolutely. As I said before, a lot of times people come to the crew leader training having been a planter previously. We have another volunteer role. People go out and check all the trees that we planted the previous year. We call them summer inspectors, and that's a really great way to involve people when the weather's nice. They literally walk around a route of 30 trees in the summer. It's a really fun opportunity for a lot of people, and that's a great way to get people engaged in the summertime. And then we have these crew leader trainings in November. So each program runs 2 trainings. They're one-day trainings, but we do them in 2 separate locations. For our Neighborhood Trees program, we do one in Portland and then one in Vancouver. So a lot of people who have never planted with us, maybe they were summer inspectors, maybe they got trees the previous year, they come to this crew leader training I think we run it from 7 to 4, and about 7:30 to noon is what we call the classroom portion. They're taught things like volunteer management, communication skills, and then also planting depth, what to do to a bald and burlap tree versus a containerized versus a bare root tree. They're given very basic tree biology information. We really feel that little bit of knowledge really empowers people to make decisions and get very active. For the neighborhood coordinators, the training is 2 days, and it's a little bit less on tree biology and planting procedure, and it's more about helping them identify their own network, helping them find people in their neighborhood that are going to be tree advocates with them. It's a really big job for one person to do, and so we really encourage them to find people in their neighborhood, like-minded people who maybe aren't willing to take on the leadership role, but would be willing to help them with discrete, specific tasks. And so that training is focused a lot on building their own personal network, and it's also pretty heavy on our online system, which has some quirks to it.
Great. And from, I guess, a staffing standpoint, do you have any tips for sort of the skills you look for in your volunteer program leaders? Like who's good at building a social space?
Sure. Yeah, we're really lucky. We have 2 full-time staffers who work in the volunteer program, and they're both sitting in the room, so I have to say that they are just great guys. No, in all seriousness, though, they really kind of have that knack of connecting with people, and they're both amazing at those outreach events, getting people excited about Friends of Trees. I think one of the most essential things is the ability to convey enthusiasm, and I think that both of them do that better than almost anybody I've seen. They can really the passion that they feel for what we do, it really shows, and that's the best way to recruit other volunteers is to get them excited about it.
Great. One other question over the internet. Has Friends of Trees tried to utilize a youth tree planting and education program as part of the tree planting efforts?
We do. Yes and no. We don't have anything specific for that, but our plantings are set up that in a way that kids can participate very easily. All of our crew leaders know to expect kids. One of the things we talk about at our crew leader trainings is the difference between interacting with children volunteers and adult volunteers, because there are some techniques for working with them versus adults. During the summer, we work with that's year-round now. We work with a group called the Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center that provides job skill training through our crew leader program. They help us out during the week. They do some of our follow-up maintenance in the summer. If trees don't get planted at a certain event, they'll come back through during the week of. But for right now, that's the only specific program we have that deals with youth volunteers.
Okay, great. Tricia, do we have any questions over the phone?
We do have one question. The name was not recorded. If you queued up for a question, your line is open.
Hello?
Hi there.
Hi. Question regarding funding. The things like the vests and other perks for the volunteers, do you generally get those donated, or do you find a place through your grants to fund those?
Grants and contracts fund those. The equipment we typically purchase. The vests we actually have made for us by a company down in Eugene that they do a lot of construction vests, so they're really pretty durable. A lot of those vests have been around for, I think, 8 or 9 years now.
Okay, and they get to keep those vests?
No, the vests stay with us. The program staff wear the purple vests on the day of the planting, and then crew leaders all have for the Green Spaces program, it's a color based on their crew, and for the Neighborhood Trees program, it's the orange vest. It's just a way to kind of differentiate them. So at the beginning of the planting, they're issued a clipboard with all their planting instructions, the vest, and a pair of pruners. And then when they come back at the end of the planting, we sort of check all that back in.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
T-shirts are the one thing that they do get to keep.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you.
No, thank you.
We've got a question out from the Pacific Northwest. Are you using social media to get and keep volunteers, and what have you found to be most effective for recruiting and recognizing volunteers through social media?
Sure. We have had really good success with publicizing our events through social media. I don't know that we've done any sort of analysis on what technique works best for recruitment. I know that our Facebook page gets a lot of attention. We talk about the plantings. We talk about the trainings. To be perfectly honest, we do a lot of sort of old-fashioned postering for our volunteer recruitment, especially for our crew leaders in the fall. We try to blanket the city, coffee shops, libraries, community centers with posters for our trainings.
And then, not to end on like a down note, but in instances where perhaps the planting hasn't gone as well as you would have liked, or it seems that a volunteer hasn't had a good time, what are the approaches you take to try to help them feel better about it and, hopefully get them to come back a second time? So what are sort of the damage mitigation?
Sure. Our program staff are really, really good at accentuating the positive. They are very good at focusing on the achievements of the day. If we were supposed to get 160 trees in and we got 100 trees in, then that is amazing that we got 100 trees in. I think everybody is very aware of the emotional impact of sort of the failed planting, and so we really, really try not to ever use that kind of language, and it's always a celebration of what we have done, and sort of every little bit counts. And if you were only able to plant 3 of your 10 trees, that's no big deal. You got those 3 trees in, and that's great. And we really emphasize with the crew leaders especially to keep people comfortable. If the weather is bad, people don't stay out as long. We try to make sure that everybody's very aware of the physical and emotional state of the volunteers. I don't know that we've ever had any sort of real issue with someone having a bad time and sort of needing that follow-up. we're very good at communicating with our volunteers about expectations, and we have on our website a volunteer rights and responsibilities document that talks about what they can expect from us, and then it talks about ways for them to talk to us and the structure to discuss problems that they're having. And we found that just keeping that open line of communication can sort of mitigate any of those problems, or let me say most of those problems, the vast majority.
Okay, and one final question. For when you notice that there are volunteers who are very enthusiastic, but maybe, I don't know if it's their social skills aren't great, or the tree planting project sort of activity doesn't seem like maybe the best fit for them. There are other ways that you try to engage them, looking at other skills they may have in other places within the organization.
Absolutely. Every once in a while, we'll have someone who is either a crew leader or a neighborhood coordinator who maybe just isn't, like you said, doesn't have the personality that necessarily fits. We really try to make a space elsewhere in the organization. There's lots of other stuff that people can do, and we've had really good luck with converting people who maybe weren't quite as good at one role. Again, we just talk to them honestly about, people are not generally ignorant of their own strengths and weaknesses, and so an honest appraisal of their strengths and explaining that their strengths fit better with other positions tends to be all that we need to do. Again, we try not to say, you're not good at this, but rather, you're better at this. Would you be interested in doing this for us? And we've had pretty good luck with that. We've had a couple of instances over the past few years where we have had those conversations, and they're not always comfortable, but I'm proud to say that it's never ended in any sort of hurt feelings or anything. These people are still around, just in different roles.
That's great. All right, Tricia, one last question. Do we have any questions on the line?
I should no other questions at this time.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Greg, for giving us some perspective on how you guys do such a great job with your volunteers in Portland. We are going to move on next to our second Greg, our second presenter, Greg Levine, who is Program Director at Trees Atlanta in Atlanta, Georgia, and is also a member of the ACT Board. Some people believe that Greg lives, eats, and breathes trees, and while that's not true, he did plant his first tree when he was just 5 years old. It was a purple-leafed Japanese maple. Seeing his love for plants, his parents sent him off to University of Georgia for a bachelor's in landscape architecture. After a few years, in 1995, he left a landscape architecture firm where a lot of his time was spent on removing trees, and happily went to work for the National Arboretum in Washington, D.C. Following his time there, Greg was hired as a volunteer coordinator for Trees Atlanta, where he's been since. Now a certified arborist and program director at Trees Atlanta, Greg has had the opportunity to create and develop several programs, including neighborhoods, forest restoration, neighborhood arboreta, the Beltline Arboretum, and many educational programs. Greg helped to write Trees Atlanta's Forest Restoration Manual and was recently selected as one of Atlanta Homes Magazine's Emerging Talent, 20 under 40. And we won't talk about his current age, but we will say that Greg is continuing to use that talent to improve Atlanta's forest cover. Thanks so much for joining us today, Greg.
Thank you, Leland. I appreciate you not telling everybody my age, which is now over 40. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited about giving this talk. I'm very passionate about volunteers and the volunteers making your program, whatever your program may be, successful. It, in my opinion, is the strongest part of our organization. We have a lot of skilled staff, and we have a great mission, but without the people that you see on the screen, some of our staff, we would not be where we are today. So I have to say that volunteers are the way to move forward in any organization dealing with community trees. It's not moving for me, Leland.
How's that?
It's attempting to restore connection.
Okay, well, I can advance your slides if you may have lost your connection. So we're on the volunteer network now.
All right. So Trees Atlanta has basically had volunteer programs for about 25 years. In the last 20 years, it's been more tree planting and less office administration. We have about 14,000 volunteer hours a year, and we're planting right now anywhere from 1,600 to 2,500 trees per year. We also started a seedling planting program this year, and we're looking to plant about anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 tree seedlings a year, which is kind of our newest program. And to date, that number is a little old. I think we're about 42,000 volunteer trees planted to date. You see that picture, that's our tree cell, and that's, again, all those people. This is the beginning of the project. I think in that group of 8 people, there's 1 staff person. So we really are really kind of work in a ways run by the community itself. Next slide, please. So I kind of think there's really your 7 keys to success, and some of them are, you know, just common sense, and it's like having the right staff. Recruiting volunteers, the different ways and methods of doing that. Creating opportunities, meaning giving them lots of ways that they can help out. Developing the volunteers, appreciating them, celebrating, and creating a community. That's our staff from last year. Some more good-looking staff in this next slide here. We've hired a lot of, in my days of being here at 15 years, we've hired about 8 or so volunteer programming staff, and there's some key traits, as the other Greg was speaking about earlier, and it is pretty consistent. You've got to be likable. Nobody wants to come to help on their Saturday mornings at 8 or 9 o'clock to somebody who's a little drippy. So a little bit of charm goes a long way. Outgoing, for the most part, you can tell the difference in outgoing versus the little less outgoing, but outgoing certainly helpful when you have new people, coming to help you, but maybe shy themselves. So you've got to be having staff that goes a little bit out of their comfort zone to make other people more comfortable is very important. Sincerity. Obviously, you can thank people, you can give them a T-shirt, but a true thanks from the heart, the true appreciation is going to have volunteers coming back over and over and over again. Adaptability. A good coordinator, as Greg was saying earlier as well, you've got to adapt to the situation, whether it be a not necessarily problem with a volunteer, but a volunteer that needs to be directed in a different way. They've got to be able to change what they're doing, be able to basically manage several situations at one time, whether you've got a volunteer who's having a problem with a neighbor or a volunteer who just needs a little bit of correction on how they plant a tree. You basically got to approach every single person a different way, and so you got to be able to read people. And engaging. Engagement is kind of fits with all of these, but if you're outgoing, you usually can engage people to help. But you basically want to bring people into the community, into the tree planting community, and that means basically being a friend to everybody who comes out to plant a tree on that Saturday. So you really want to make sure everybody feels like they're part of this larger team, this larger family of tree planting folks. Next slide, please. Recruiting volunteers. We have, again, our volunteer program is about 20 years old for the tree planting portion of it. And even when I started 15 years ago, it was literally on the phone. And there was a beauty about recruiting volunteers every week on the phone. You'd really have to call people for like 8 hours a day, just calling people to get them to come to your project. You really got to know your volunteers. You'd have conversations about their kids, about their work, about their dog, about their yard. I mean, it was not the most time efficient, but there was a beauty about it that you really, really developed close relationships with your volunteers. And then early email, we had email maybe in 2000. We had email. That was exciting. You reached tons of people, so many more people. So we would start going to festivals and getting volunteers to sign up. And, of course, then everybody got inundated with tons of email, so we had to spice it up, make it a little bit nicer. And I know many groups are using constant contact now. Now, the change from phone calls to constant contact is just a little less personal. So you've got to do some things. You obviously reach a lot more people. So to get those repeat volunteers, you have to reach more people because you're not spending as much time with them. Recruiting volunteers is pretty easy now that we have the web, the internet, our websites. We basically have a recruitment that you can actually sign up on our website. It goes straight into our constant contact list, and so it will basically be added instantly. You get to thank you for signing up, and you really don't have to do that much to recruit people. It's just getting them to come to the projects that can be difficult sometimes. We have 3,000 people on our constant contact list, but we pretty much get about 100 volunteers a week. So that weekly email has got to be dynamic and interesting, fun. And we have things on our weekly emails that talk about the project, thank groups for coming. We have a tree ed, which is tree education. And we also have staff of the day, which some of the staff doesn't use staff of the day, but some of them do, but just basically a little tree quote or a story. And, to get people to open up those emails and want to help them, to help us by joining us on that following Saturday. Festivals have been, since the beginning, it's been a great way to recruit volunteers. We go to about 10 or so festivals a year. One of them is Inman Park, which you see the little picture here. We actually are in a parade, which is a great way to advertise. That's me, my adorable little nephew in the very back. But people have learned a lot from us being at festivals, just through passing on educational information, but also they have learned, wow, this looks like a great fun group, especially being at the parade, and people have signed up to volunteer from us just by being in this one parade called the Inman Park Festival, which is really great. Of course, the website recruitment I've already spoken of, but I have to say that really changed the quantity of volunteers, both our website and having people able to sign up. That was a big change in the actual quantity of people that we get out to go to projects. So it was pretty consistent that we would only have one project a week about 8 years ago, and then it kind of turned to 2 projects a week, and now we're doing it from 3, sometimes 4 projects a week. And of course, the last thing is advertisement. And for those that have heard me give this presentation before, my father has, taught us, all of his kids, early to bed, early to rise, work like hell, and advertise. And there's a lot of great ways to do it that's not so in your face, like a billboard would be. But we actually have signs that say, Trees Atlanta, Trees Atlanta, planted trees again, or different little signs throughout the city. Another neighborhood tree planting. Also T-shirts. You can see everybody's wearing different green T-shirts. We don't give T-shirts out to volunteers after one project. You actually have to earn your T-shirt after about 6 projects, about 18 volunteer hours. So when people have green Trees Atlanta T-shirt, they know that they're part of the community, the tree planting community, and it really brings people closer together and kind of their own little family. And of course, our Saturday projects, we have a lot of Trees Atlanta jackets, shirts. We have Trees Atlanta on our trucks. Basically, when we're in your neighborhood, it's Trees Atlanta. There's no matter how much clothing we're wearing, you can tell that it's a Trees Atlanta project going on. Actually, I've seen some of these. I think the Philadelphia planting group, they have a great 20-foot flag that basically really light. You just bring it out, and it's amazing to see it for several blocks. And I think it's another great advertisement for an opportunity to volunteer. So creating volunteer opportunities is something that we have really, really worked on the past 15 years, because originally we just planted trees in downtown with contractors, and then our neighborhoods, which we didn't call neighborhoods, but we called it our tree planting program, started about 1990. Since then, we have opened up several other volunteer opportunities, everything from mulching, watering, and pruning, of course, forest restoration, which I know a lot of groups have, where we literally are protecting forests by removing the invasive species out of them. And some people all they want to do is forest restoration. It's one of the few projects they'll come out for, which some people run from it because of poison ivy, but a lot of people, that's all they want to do. Photography and social networking, it's amazing how much it's helped our organization. I'm not the technical person in the office, but I'm seeing the value of it. And it seems that this year we've been doing some different ways of doing that. And again, I can't even think of it, although I'm actually on friends, the friends list and all those things. We have a volunteer who does nothing but social network for us, and she's in her suit and high heels, and she comes to projects. She takes some pictures and she puts it on different social networks. So it's pretty interesting. It's a way to that she could help, and it's been a super great help. And she's not necessarily into getting dirty. And of course, office help, where we find a lot of people don't want to plant trees or can't plant trees, and we have several regular volunteers that come here weekly, and they're really important for us to get everything done in the office with more limited resources in this economy. So developing your volunteer force is something, again, that it's changed a lot in 15 years. We've created a tree keeper program, which is 6 courses, everything from forest restoration and pruning classes to also identifying trees, diseases. And it looks like we're going to be adding a design class to this program as well, so it's probably going to become 7 classes. We have a pruning class that we do about 10 or 12 times a year, and it's pruning 101 and 102. 101 kind of goes over the general basis of how to prune, and 102 gets into specific trees like redbuds and crepe myrtles. We actually have a 103 class. It's American elm as well. I have a volunteer group that comes out once a week, 3 or 4 people that all they do is prune. They get a map and they go out and prune. They've been through several years of pruning for us, but also they've been through all the classes. Again, it's just creating a lot of different ways that volunteers can not get bored. You know, although planting trees is wonderful and we all enjoy it, people like to be challenged, so you want to add different components to community tree planting and community tree work. Tree walks, Stephanie Coffins in the lower picture here. Stephanie's one of those people who basically used to plant trees with us, had some, minor muscle issues, started pruning with us, and then that got difficult, and now she kind of helped create a tree walk in her neighborhood with the granite markers and helped create the map, and she now helps lead projects in her neighborhood, basically figuring out where the trees should go, and it gets back into leading projects. Once a volunteer has been really successful in helping us out, an individual out, helping create a project, going through a tree keeper program, we actually have them lead projects when we have too many projects for the amount of staff that we have. Sometimes they co-lead, sometimes they actually lead it from start to finish. We don't have an official title for them. We just know which of those volunteers can handle that. And even the fact that you're on the insurance to drive one of our trucks, I mean, that means we know that we have full faith and trust in you. So you're developing that relationship as well as the volunteers' value to the organization. One of the things that we've always tried to do is keeping it fun, and I can be a workhorse sometimes, but I'm hoping that everybody's always enjoying themselves. But we do a lot of fun things together, but we also even have fun at the projects. And if it's ever not fun, then I don't think people would still come out. So these are all regular volunteers here, and I don't know where that couch came from, but he seems to be pretty happy. It's Jimmy. Appreciation. I mean, this is kind of those regular, everybody knows you need to appreciate your volunteers and show it. The ways that we do it are that we do let volunteers lead projects. So we acknowledge that they're important to us, and we know that they have great skills and they get to lead a project. The T-shirt I talked about earlier, sometimes we make a big deal about you getting a T-shirt. Sometimes it's kind of like, oh, here's your T-shirt. But everyone knows you've better been out there 6 projects, for the Green Trees Atlanta T-shirt, I've actually had volunteers come up to me and get upset by it if they thought somebody got a shirt that didn't deserve it. So, you know, again, there's value to that. It shows that, you know, you've earned it, and we notice that you've been here this much, and here's a thanks. We ask for their input. I've always really thought that the more minds you have working, the more input you get from people, you're going to have a better result. Doesn't mean I ask, you know, as the coordinators ask for, you know, what kind of tree should I plant in every spot, but sometimes it's good to have the volunteers' experience and, frankly, their opinions when you're trying to make some decisions. And they really have had volunteers come up to us before and say, you know, I just appreciate you thinking that my opinion matters and that I actually know something. So it gets back to that sincere praise and thanks. Susan, who's been here for about 5 or 6 years, and Bill Pardue, who was the Volunteer of the Year award for ACT last year, giving him a big hug, and he's a great guy, and we, again, can't thank him enough, but we can thank him with our hearts, and I think we do a really good job of that. So celebration is a little bit different than appreciation. Celebration is just trying to have fun. So we do a little bit of we've just started having a volunteer acknowledgement in the newsletters where we pick up a couple of volunteers, talk about them, and talk about their experience with volunteering with us. So it's in the newsletter now. We do nominate them for awards. It's how Bill didn't get Volunteer of the Year award by just being around. We actually have to nominate them, and I think I encourage everybody to nominate them, not just to that award, but any award. I think people appreciate it that they're going to get nominated, and when they win, I mean, most people really appreciate that. After every single project, we try to meet up in one location to have pizza, because we're not just celebrating that we just planted 150 trees or 100 trees, but we're celebrating our friendships and the groups of the meeting new people and the mission. So we all eat pizza together, and it's every single Saturday we do that, whether we're pruning trees or we're planting, we're out there, and we really are trying to get those volunteers together to create their own community, their own family. People all have their own families, but sometimes it's nice to have two. So as you can see, the front 3 people in that photo that's my sister and her family, sitting with the Trees Atlanta family, and they come out and plant a lot. Another key is to get your family out there when you're desperate. Family and really good friends don't say no to you when you need help. And when you develop that relationship with those volunteers and they do become your family and they know that you need someone to drive the truck, they're going to be out there, whether it's raining or not. Or if one of your staff people is sick and you have 2 projects scheduled, one of those volunteers is going to take over. So it's really developing those relationships. It's important. And, it comes back to the staff to really you have to have the right people who really believe in this work, and it's not just a job. Frankly, I think people who come into any kind of volunteer leadership program who it's just a job to, you're not going to have a successful program. It may work, but it's not going to be everything it can be. So you've got to have the right person. And we have our annual volunteer party is one of our very fun events. We basically have a party at the end of the year for anybody who's volunteered about 18 hours. We do have a potluck. It's been at my house every year but once when I was in renovation. And we give out gifts for different years of volunteers who have helped us. So we have volunteers who have volunteered for 1 year, but we've got about a group of 30 or so that have volunteered for over 5 years. And I've got about 2 or 3 that still volunteer after 10 years. And this is not that common for volunteers to come back for that many years. We've got about 40 or 50 that have been coming back for 3 years and over. So we usually have about 50 to 60 people at our potluck, and we usually have a slideshow and drinking a little bit of beer and wine and eating some really good food that our organization did not pay for. We even had our beer donated this year, so it's a great way to bring volunteers together because they're not just coming out to plant trees and they're coming out there to plant trees, to do something good for the community, to make themselves feel better when sometimes you can get a little down on things, but also to develop lifelong friendships. So some of the other ways you can create that volunteer community is just to do other social events that you either send through your volunteer emails, or they can actually come from volunteers themselves to other volunteers. We have a weekly trivia now that anywhere from 5 to 10 people go to. In the spring, we have a softball team. We got close to doing really well this year, and Blake can yell at me for not knowing how well we did, but he's sitting behind me. But we had a really good team this year, and it's like a nonprofit team, and we have about 20 or so people on it. A lot of fun. Again, play softball, get beer afterwards. A lot of fun times there. We have a drive-in and a rafting trip that the drive-in's more led by our coordinators, and we go to our drive-in, do a cookout, and the rafting trip is pretty much all driven by volunteers. They all go up on a Sunday. Sometimes they do it on a Saturday, which is unfortunate because I usually don't get to go. But on Sundays, they have a rafting trip. It's a lot of fun. We've been doing that for about 8 or 9 years. And we have an annual holiday party, which is usually for big donors and big-time volunteers. And again, I mean, what I would like to get through to everybody, that it becomes more than just a community group, but it becomes a community family. And I really appreciate everybody listening to this. And I just, again, can't say enough how important it is to develop not just a program, but a community. And you can see Brighton up here. He's actually in Friends of Trees over here on the left next to me. And he really did push while he was here in Atlanta these social aspects and really added to the organization. So I have to give him a high five for that. So another thing is you create generations of volunteers too, because over here on the left this is John McFarland and his son. And John has been volunteering for about 15 years off and on, and he's now bringing his son to projects. And it's amazing to actually see generations coming to help. He actually met his wife at one of our projects as well. I think my third project at Trees Atlanta. Anyway, well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Leland, and I enjoyed talking to everyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Greg. So the takeaways are that you need your staff to be unflappably friendly, and then you need to marry off your volunteers to each other so that they all come back and work together and have kids and bring more volunteers to volunteer again.
Yeah, generations of tree lovers.
All right. Well, I think we're getting close to the hour, so we'll just have time for 1 or 2 questions. Tricia, can you remind folks how they ask a question over the phones?
Sure. To ask a question, please press star then 1, and please be sure to unmute your phone and clearly record your name. Again, that's star 1, and we will allow a few moments.
Great. And again, if you want to type in a question, you can just use that Q&A button at the top of your screen and type your question in to me. As we're waiting for people to come up with questions for Greg, he did a great job covering everything. I guess one question I just have for you is how you just identify the folks who have potential to be more. Is it just the number of times they come back to volunteer for you, or when can you notice that someone could be a good leader? Is it just from experiencing it in the field?
Well, a little bit obviously is personality. If somebody, it's about how they speak to people, and how obviously how the staff speaks to people needs to be very similar. Some people are really friendly and say things to people that's helpful versus ways that make people not happy. So you've got to have that personality. You also have to have the willingness. We have a few volunteers who just don't want to lead projects, but they come out every week. So it's both willingness and just having the skill set in communication. And we just kind of make those decisions, and sometimes we say, I just don't think that person should be leading a project. It's not as official as making somebody a team leader. Usually, the people know who are willing to lead a project. Occasionally, people will come to us, say, I'm ready to lead a project, or I'd like to lead a project. But it's more usually we ask.
You guys are the ones who know. All right, Tricia, do we have any questions over the line? Tricia?
I show no questions at this time.
Okay. Then one final question for you, Greg. You mentioned that you have the many ways that you use volunteers who, in other capacities as well, not just for tree planting. You mentioned that you have one volunteer who does a lot of your social media stuff, and I know that's not the area that you run per se, but how do you feel comfortable utilizing a volunteer and to communicate your brand, to be your voice, either at an event, like you said, with all these festivals that you go to, or online? Someone who's not a staff person, but is still sort of communicating about Trees Atlanta and what you're about. How do you feel?
But a lot of it we've been doing through Facebook.
That responsibility.
I think a lot of it we've been doing through Facebook and Twitter. And she has a kind of regular conversations with our marketing person and also the staff. And she's also, this particular person I know very well. She was my neighbor for 3 years. So, and she's very professional. She was a manager at a company for many years. And so it's really professionalism. And just knowing, again, having faith in a person. And if there was ever a problem, it would probably end in her social networking. But she's been really excellent. And, again, we were doing a little bit of it until somebody came up to the plate and said, I want to help you in your social networking. It wasn't what it is today. And it really has exploded this year. And we've been, now the staff's doing a little bit more. Like if we feel like we're short on volunteers, they'll actually jump on Facebook and say, hey, we could use a few extra volunteers, and it's helped quite a bit.
Excellent. All right, well, we are now right at the top of the hour, so we are going to wrap things up. For folks who have more questions, you can see the contact information there on the screen right now, or feel free to email your questions to me, and I can get answers back from today's presenters. The presentation today, the recording of it, and a resource list about volunteer retention will be available on the ACT website in about 1 week, and we will email the link, the access to those resources to anyone who completes our survey, which is now up on the screen. So take a second to complete the survey at the link shown there. Our next webcast will be on the third Thursday of April. That's April 21st, so stay tuned for our announcements. I want to say a huge thank you to our presenters today, the Gregs, Greg Tudor and Greg Levine from opposite sides of the country, giving us two really great perspectives on how they have managed to build such strong volunteer programs. Thanks to everyone for listening in this afternoon. Hope you will join us for our next webcast, and a big thank you to our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the USDA Forest Service. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you for your participation today. You may disconnect at this time.
Thanks, Tricia.
Thank you. Have a good day.